So if you don't know, or the people don't know, they are making another Resident Evil movie attempt. I feel like so you had the Paul Anderson movies, which started out but not awful, and then they just got awful. Then you had the Welcome to Raccoon City, which was like the reboot that was supposed to be faithful to the games. It was, but it still just was not great. And now the director of the movie Barbarian, which was like a pretty big popular horror movie, is taking the role of like trying to make it work.
I mean, okay, this is just going to sound horrible and it's not going to pan out well for me, but my only real question is Mia Jovovich in it?
No, thank God.
Well, then count me out. But, no. Like, I'm sorry. Like, so, it is perfect for a movie. The story is perfect for a movie.
Yes.
The issue that we have here is that at some point, several people tried. And thank you for trying, but no.
Yeah, I'm on the fence because one, like, it's my favorite franchise. Anything Resident Evil, like, I will give a try. And I've had enough heartbreak with any content that they've made, whether it was the TV show they did or like a TV show that got announced. It was supposed to be, I think it was called Arklay, which took place in the Arklay Mountains, which is where the mansion was. The show that Netflix did was off the wall, just the most weird thing. It wasn't bad, actually, but it was definitely not like a canon piece of content. The movie's the same way. Like, it wasn't canon. It was just kind of like meh. So when I read it, I was like, I'm out. I'm not interested. Like, you've broke my heart already. I've given up the fact that it's probably not gonna happen and make good content. So,
Well,
we can move on.
I just want to articulate this because they could. Like, they could.
Which is my next thing here. I've been listening to audiobooks at work. I have physical copies of the S.D. Perry Resident Evil books.
Okay.
And I went to YouTube to try and find it because I couldn't find it anywhere else to listen to. And I found the first one to listen to on YouTube, the channel Residents of Evil. They actually had somebody read the entire collection, and they have them on YouTube so that you can listen to them, because you can't find the audiobooks for those anywhere. So I listened to the first one. I'm like halfway through. Let me make it very clear. If the person writing the movie for this just reads that book, you have the entire script, the movie layout, everything right there. Do that, and it will be fantastic.
I mean, that's...
Because what they've done in that book is they've literally taken the first game, adapted it a smidge from obvious, like, game, and like you're in a mansion, there's locked doors with keys with weird things, and you're just like, oh, this is kind of weird, and weird puzzles, and you're like, okay, whatever. They made it make sense and made it realistic in the book, because they come up, like, when they get to the mansion, they're in the door, they go to open a door and it's locked, and they're, you know, if it's an old building, which it's an old mansion, of course, you have the doorknob plates. On the doorknob plate is the etching of, like, the key that is needed. And it's not like, oh, I guess I gotta go search for the key. It's just like, oh, I guess I gotta go somewhere else to whatever. And when they find the thing that they need, it makes sense. It's not just like they stumble upon it. Like, finding it is in a realistic way. And all of the events in the game so far have happened in the book. And it's a real treat as somebody who knows that so well. Because when they get to it, you're just like, oh man, like they're in that room. Like, I can picture the room and what's going on in the event. And it gives you like a real life depiction of it rather than like the game depiction of it.
I'm not trying to be a smartass, but that's literally what a book is.
Well, yes, I understand that, but like when you're going from one piece of media to another like if there's a book that was made into a movie that was then made into a game, however if you consume all three of those, it's going to give you three different like versions basically.
Well, I mean, truth be told, the book is actually going to give you exponential versions because the visual is what you articulate in your mind from the words that you hear. So, and that's kind of that's why books to movies is a little bit dangerous, because when people have a mentality of a book,
people are like, oh, the book was better.
They have their own personalized expectation and their depiction in their head, and when somebody else doesn't have that, they convey that as disappointment, where it's not just difference.
It's the same way as, you take such a beloved franchise as Resident Evil. Like, when you think of Chris Redfield, you think of what Chris Redfield looks like in the games. When you think of Jill, you think of what Jill looks like in the games. And the minute you look at the movie and you're like, that's not like Leon, for example, you know what Leon Kennedy looks like.
Sure.
Then you look at Welcome to Raccoon City and who played Leon Kennedy, and you're like, well, that's a bit far.
So that's the thing with the games. The games already have the visual component.
Yeah.
So if you adapt that to a movie, I think that your starting point literally has to be all of the cutscenes sequentially as they occur throughout the game.
Yeah.
And then, you already have but basically your sets, you don't have your actor, but you have all the visuals.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of build the script from there and flush out the parts where it's gameplay.
Yes.
And find ways to connect the dots.
And you have to like make certain things make sense.
Right.
And in this part you're supposed to be running around and fighting a snake, or you're supposed to find this, or you're supposed to just explore. Like, you have to adapt it somehow. But just listening to that book and the way that they have the puzzles, just kind of like, they're not the forefront, they're kind of just sprinkled in, and it's like in scenarios that make sense, with the doors, and then in the room with the poison gas vents in there, which is where I stopped for today. So I'll see how that pans out tomorrow probably, but everything with how everything's going and how Wesker's in on it, but he's not being super obvious. And the way they depict Wesker as well in the book is he's not just like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I need to do and the way I need to navigate the mansion to do this. He's like, oh great, like if I need to get from here to there, I have to go through those doors and I have to have the crests and I have to do this to get through here. He's like, it's not realistic that I'm going to get through there, so I need to find a different way, or I need to stay away from the others and let them figure it out first. And it's so well done that if they just took that, you probably would have to, alter a couple of things, but you take the scenery from the game, you build a set around it, and then, you find characters that are resemble the characters that we know.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
and you've got a hit right there.
Maybe
it's what everybody wants.
Maybe. Well, yes, it's what everybody wants, and I think that formula makes sense. Does it work? Not a fucking clue, because nobody's ever actually tried it. But I do want to make a point real quick, at least with the whole game to movie concept after trying it twice.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Annie?
Like the The little like.
It's a
orphan?
Hard Knock.
Yeah.
But, right. The original.
Maybe.
Years ago with like the bald guy.
Maybe.
Okay, so that came out many, many moons ago.
Yeah,
The Annie reboot with Jamie Foxx was a huge success because by the time it came out, everybody who remembered the original Annie was probably 6 feet under. It's new again, even though it's not. That's the only way a movie redo works. You cannot pitch it to the same audience.
Movie remakes are definitely sketchy. Game remakes are different.
Well, and this is now both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
so
for context.
Yeah, I think that everybody, when you get into Hollywood and you get to these filmmakers with these grand ambitions and they want to make it their own or they want to make it entertaining, I think at some point with something like something that has as big of a fan base as Resident Evil, when you get to making a movie about it and you look at the grand picture of all of its fan base and you're like, all right, we need to stay in these lines here to make it good, and we have to kind of stick to, it's like the Last of Us show. Look at the Last of Us show. That is pretty much frame for frame the game. The story of the game is, and all like the scenes in it are basically frame for frame. But when you're watching it, you don't really think of it that way. You think of it as something new. Because you have Pedro Pascal playing Joel, which, is not really what Joel looks like, but he's pretty damn close. And
Joel's not real, so.
And Bella Ramsey plays Ellie, and she doesn't look like Ellie, but after you watch it, you're like, okay, that's Ellie.
I mean, games ultimately, like those kind of games that have stories like that, really are interactive movies.
Yeah.
So I'm torn on the whole. Let's make the game into a video depiction anyway, because I feel like at that point it takes away the interactive piece.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and I can agree there, but when I look at something that has this story that you can sink your teeth into, because there's tons of lore behind Resident Evil.
Right, but somebody has to write that.
Well, it's already written.
Well, yes, but Star Wars was not as big as it is today because of one movie.
Yes.
Somebody had to come up with that, and it was a lot of people over a long time. So what I'm saying is, instead of like revisiting the same content and saying, "Oh, let's take this one little sliver and make it in 50 different ways,"
when you
write something fucking new based off of it.
Well, yes, you can do that, but what I think benefits a fan base and a franchise is if they make this new movie and it's basically what I'm saying, like where they took the first game and they stayed within these parameters of what happens in the game. They added a couple flavorful things here and there. Maybe in the book they have Jill think about times with her dad, and they give Chris, one of his friends, went missing in the city.
So what you're telling me is the best parts about the book are the parts that they added?
No,
so
not
that's in the game.
No, it's not. I'm
not
saying
that's good.
I'm not saying that's the best part of the book, but it's a nice little touch to have. It just makes you understand and like the characters more.
Okay.
Because you're building more of a background and a foundation.
Sure. Yeah.
For why they are the way they are. Why is Chris this hardened, dude? It's like, oh well, he's dealing with thinking that his friend is probably dead in Raccoon City, and Jill has this troubled past with her dad because she basically used to be borderline criminal in picking locks and everything. So you give these characters these backgrounds, which they could do in the movie. They could incorporate and show even flashbacks of, before they were Stars members, which
Yeah.
that would be fantastic.
Well, and they can do a great job with this.
100%.
They can make it amazing. I don't think they will, but
I don't think I have zero expectations for
the
it.
part I'm getting at is that regardless of whether you do well or poorly, at the end of the day, it is still a cash grab centered around humanity's desire for common ideas and habit.
Yeah, but if you have this successful movie, like with the whole, like what I was saying originally, with the thing that benefits these franchises is if Resident Evil nails this movie and it's actually what we want and is good, you're bringing in new people to the franchise, or you're just sharing the story of it with people that just don't play games, and you have new fans because of that. And whether they're people that read books, whether they're people that watch movies, whether they're people that do play games and watch movies and read books, now you've opened this whole
They exist.
massive thing of content to these people that they wouldn't have found in the first place.
I mean, I don't think that it's a bad idea.
I think
Please, something new.
what
new.
makes it bad is just we've been burned too many times. It's like if somebody remade Mario 64 for the Switch and they just butchered it, and then the following year Nintendo was like, okay, we're gonna remake Mario 64 for the Switch, and then they do it and it's good, and you're like, but it's the same kind of thing where you're like, really, are you really gonna do it?
I mean, have you ever heard the term "you can't unring a bell"?
yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Once it's rung, you always will hear it.
Yeah, so I can't wait to see what information comes out,
I can.
like as it goes, like when they start casting or when they start writing, or if maybe they have a script already or whatever. But
I
do want to see, because you normally tell, like, as you look at stuff as they release information, when they get it, you're like, no. They have like the teaser images or like the set pieces from it, and you're like, yikes.
I always wonder how we can do that, but for whatever reason, the fucking person in the room can't.
What do you mean?
How we can look at like these teasers and be like, no. And like the consensus
yeah.
can be like, no. And the person in the room's like, oh, this is amazing. Shivers, chills, just chills.
Oh, creative masterpiece.
And then the guy that financed it all walks in. He's like, what the fuck is this? Tear it down. And it's just like, oh, we worked so hard. Okay. Work hard again. That means that you'll be great at it the second time.